Here are a couple of paintings up right now at the Bakersfield Museum of Art. I want to focus on the one on the left, which is 16801 Van Nuys Boulevard. The title of the painting is the street address of the place that the painting depicts, which I like doing because it allows me to tell you something very specific and true about what I'm showing you, but not to color it emotionally at all. These are both sort of typical of the things that I like to paint, which has been defined as a sort of North American purgatory, right? Places people don't go to be there. And that interests me a lot because it's a little existential sliver that we spend a lot of our lives in. The way that Dostoevsky put it was that looking forward we die too young, and looking back we die too late. These places that we built for ourselves in the United States are almost an architectural instantiation of that state of mind. They're not really built for you to be there, they're sort of built for you to pass through. I also like it that these are all part of a shared common experience. When you go too high or too low, it plays into people's fantasy lives, which is narrative poison to me. It's like Joyce's definition of pornography. He said, when you show something to someone that they want to possess in some way, that's pornography, whether it's a beach or a Porsche. So I like the cool temperature of these places because I think he was about right. And I think his definition comes from Kant's. And Kant's definition was that the greatest experience you can have in front of a work of art is this godlike moment. And the godlike moment is disinterested pleasure. So you like what you're being shown, but not because you want it in some way. So that's part of what makes this such perfect subject matter for painting to me. Here's a look at the other painting in the show, and light is also very important to me. Light is really good subject matter for painting. And these sort of situations that have multiple temperatures of light sources are great for painting because photography is a great tool to help you paint and measure and check things, but it's bad at reconciling this many temperatures of light. I like these situations I have to reconcile in the painting itself. And light is good subject matter for painting because all the parts of the painting have to agree to convey a sense of light. It's like a crime where if one of the alibis doesn't match up, you don't get away with it. So we'll look at a detail of this painting so you can see a little closer look at some of the figures and so on. You notice I muffled the text, partly because reading is a way of ascribing meaning to me that's less open-ended and interesting than the way things look. And the way things look really drives the painting. So I'm talking about ideas that go into making the painting, but the paintings themselves are the acid test for any ideas that go into them. A big part of it to me is my response to something based on whether or not I think it'll make a good painting. And that really starts with what I think painting is. And what painting is for me really starts in the museum. So here's Vermeer's view of Delft, which is a really perfect painting to me. So the cycle for me really is to look at paintings like this to see what I think painting is, go into the world to see what I think might make a good painting based on what I think painting is, and then to make a painting to test those ideas. So in the 17th century when Vermeer was painting, here's a Velázquez, Las Meninas, history painting was held to be the highest genre. And it was the highest genre because you had to be able to paint the figure, landscape, and still life and have them all cohere in the same painting. So I like the old world ambition of that, the lack of specialization that you really had to be able to do everything. So back to View of Delft, which is really a perfect painting to me, to the point where if I'm not sure what size to go for a painting, I'll go about the height of View of Delft, which is about 38 inches high, and then the width that I need for the painting. So this is a pretty blatant homage and thanks to View of Delft. It's a car wash, so a similar thing, but let's go back to the nighttime. So I think this time of day, this dusky time of day, is really perfect. It allows me to have an active sky and be able to see inside and outside at the same time. So I really like this sort of blue hour for painting things. Another appealing thing about these type of places, it's a lack of specificity that they have. This is North America, but it could be Texas, Kansas, Connecticut, everywhere in the US. So even though this happens to be in California, there aren't any palm trees. That plays too much. I'm from Albuquerque, from New Mexico, which I'll bring up again in a second. But to me, the palm tree plays into sort of a fantasy life, like a vacation or a bad guys got away with the heist. And I'm interested in sort of the chill of the void. I like that little chill I get. I feel like I'm I know I'm somewhere, but not really. And these big empty stretches give me a nice little chill that makes me want to paint them. Like a big stretch of concrete or a carpet of meat is the kind of thing that gives me a little chill that makes me want to paint it. And I also like to paint these places I have mixed feelings about. So this is the Costco. You know, it's not the greatest achievement of Western civilization. So I'm not entirely proud of it as part of North American culture, but I also do kind of love it. I'm into Costco. And if I don't have those sort of mixed feelings, I don't stay interested long enough to do something like make one of these paintings about it. Auden said that poetry is a precise expression of mixed feelings. And for me, that's definitely true with the work of others, so it's something I strive for in my own paintings. So looking back at those other painters, those Dutch 17th century painters would underpaint in what they called a dead color layer. So this is a raw umber and white mostly, maybe a little bit of black, and here the sky colors coming in a little bit. So using this old, slow, careful way of looking and building up a painting and bringing it to bear on these places we've made for ourselves that aren't really made to be looked at all is, to me, one of the things that makes it kind of an exciting thing to make a painting out of these places. I mentioned before about Albuquerque, and the reason that's relevant here is if you've ever been there, it's high desert. So it's about a mile above sea level. There's about a 2,000 foot variance in altitude, so you can see very far across the landscape, and the air is really dry, which makes things really sharp and clear a long way out. So it makes it very clear that you're a very small figure in a large landscape, which makes philosophical sense to me and really informs the way I scale the figures of the paintings, since that's really part of my worldview. So back to the check cashing store, sort of late stage capitalism. And now that I've sort of laid out the way I frame these paintings philosophically as kind of an area of investigation, I want to talk about how I made the painting and take a closer look at the painting from start to finish. So here's the painting at the end, and panning back so you can see pretty much the whole thing. And here's a little detail so you get a little closer look at some of the figures. And I want to go back to the very first stage of this, which is a sketch in a sketchbook. So here's the first iteration, and I really make these like one frame movies. So I start the script. This is like the first script draft, and when I say like one frame movies, you see a little red dot on there, which is the vanishing point, which I put on first to determine how I'll build up the perspective of the painting, which is also a good compositional tool to guide attention. So I really have to kind of build the set, light it, and cast it with putting figures with where I want. You can see this is a second sketch. It's a little bit more detailed. This is the drawing that determines the size and shape of the painting. So rather than start with a canvas and compromise between what I want out of the composition and the pre-existing shape, I will stretch up a blank one from that drawing. Here's a look at an early stage in the underpainting on the painting. And here's a little bit further, so you can see the vanishing point right there. And starting to figure out where I want the figures to go, even though I did that a little bit in the drawing, but they tend to move around a lot. So here's a little closer look at some of them, and some of them have to go. Some of them get to stay, depending on what I think the painting needs. And here's a look at the underpainting that's pretty much finished. I do like looking at them in this stage, and I found this to be a super useful step to take, because it really helps me separate out the values, and then I can start laying in some of the color. So pan across it a little bit. Again, this is all umber and white. Then I'll start putting the color in. There's a little bit of the sky, some of the figures. Also important to give your studio assistant treats regularly. Changing the lettering on the building because I thought it was too much. I pared it down, simplified it a lot. And really taking a super close-up look at the sky there. Some of the figures in the painting, close-up so you can see the brushwork. And again, studio assistant, you gotta take care of them. So here's the painting near the end. And that way you can see where the figures ended up, really in counterpoint to the space. And you notice that the figures are engaged with what they're doing and not really engaged with the viewer actively, because I really want the viewer to be the most important figure in the painting. So that's why I don't have the figures looking out at you, because then the painting would really be just sort of about them, and the whole painting would be sort of a support for what sort of day were they having or something. So I really want it to be a painting you can enter in a way. So I do hope you'll get a chance to see this painting in person, because really paintings should be seen in the flesh. And there's really no substitute for direct experience of a painting.